Justice for the monster.
Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name's Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hello. And on today's agenda, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was released on Friday for a brief spell in the cinemas. I have a spoiler-free review, plus we'll discuss the perennial Hollywood obsession with Mary Shelley's story.
And the long-awaited, or I don't know if it was awaited, but the slightly unexpected Heat 2 seems to be finally in production, entering production, and Michael Mann's just been making statements that have just got the internet a little bit stirred up at the moment, so we'll be diving into that later.
But first, we want to talk about delayed film releases. Because this past weekend was meant to be the opening weekend of Michael, the biopic about Michael Jackson. But you might have noticed that it's nowhere to be seen. A trailer hasn't even been released yet. So we wanted to talk about a few other films as well that have been delayed and have been pushed back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this hadn't been on my radar, which makes me realise that I'm in some kind of algorithmic bubble. You know, I thought I had a fairly decent gist of what was floating. I mean, all the other films that are on this we're going to discuss, I was aware of, but this one somehow snuck through. The algorithm didn't think it was of interest to me, so I obviously maybe I need to go start look. Perhaps correctly, but I mean, it's a big director. I mean, it's Training Day's Antoine Fuqua who's directed this, so it's it's a big project, and the budget was a reported $155 million. So shouldn't have really got into this much of a tangle, I don't think.
I mean, honestly, I don't find it surprising given how Michael Jackson and his estate have had so many legal troubles over the years. I feel like it was almost inevitable that something would come up. But admittedly, they should have probably done their due diligence before diving in. But yeah, let's talk about it. So the film wrapped production in May 2024 and then was slated after that to be released this past weekend. But then in early January, there started to be reports that there were troubles with production. Matthew Belloni's newsletter, Puck, reported that the final whole third act of the film was going to have to be reshot. Actually, I think the film starts and ends in the original script with the trial, the lawsuit that was brought against Michael Jackson
by Jordan Chandler and his family.
Exactly, Jordan Chandler, yeah, which I believe settled in 2005. And interestingly, apparently all the, there's this Michael Jackson musical out in theatres, right? There have been various kind of creative endeavours around Michael Jackson's life, and they've always just avoided that trial, that case. The stories have always stopped before them. But with this one, they actually begin and end, they make it kind of about that, and instead go as far as to try and convince the audience, allegedly, but based on this script, that he's innocent and this was, a plot to get money out of him.
Right. So this explains why the script was signed off by the estate then, because it was essentially trying to, it was putting a positive explaining way spin on things. It was trying to address them from one side, right? And of course with that the Jackson estate signed off on it. That's great, right? For your first pass, but then you've got to go, okay, who are all the people who are also in this that aren't Michael Jackson? Perhaps the Jordan Chandler and his family, the people who this is all about. Maybe they want to have sign off, and of course it turns out that there's a stipulation in the agreement that prohibitizes any dramatization of that part of their life, their story.
Yes, but the thing is, apparently, that is down to the lawyer of the estate. It was his job to say if there were any kind of legal issues that might come up with this story.
ChatGPT'd it.
Well, he was there from the beginning, so he just, I don't know if he just was unaware or just chose to overlook it and think maybe they'd get away with it. Who knows? But anyway, because of that, they then had to go back and do all these reshoots, which has, of course, caused loads of delays.
Ooh.
The other issue is that the first cut of the film is really, really long. It's about 4 hours. So then they were thinking, okay, maybe we can split it into two films, part one and part two. But now, because of all the kind of mounting expenses of reshooting the last scene, and I think also, honestly, the bad press around this, like, it's not a good look.
Yeah.
Will there even be appetite for two parts to this film? I mean, honestly, Michael Jackson has a huge following to this day, and people, I think, are fascinated by this story. So perhaps, but I think actually the fact that they've had to get rid of this whole part, I think probably acknowledging that trial, which was obviously huge news at the time, and a lot of us remember, that would have been a big draw for audiences, I suspect. And now without this, if it's just a fluff piece about him in his heyday before any of these rumors really started to gain traction, I don't know if people will be that interested in it. So they seem to have reverted back to it will just be one film. I think there's an idea that if it does do well, we have the material, we can maybe do a second part. But let's see.
I'm absolutely got no optimism that there'll be a part two if they even get to a part one. I mean, yeah, it sounds cursed, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that what they shot, as that, the third act had to be ditched, but as you've said, it was like one of those scripts where it sounds like it starts at the end and then we go back and then we go through Michael's life and then we end up where we started. So it sounds like it was a key thread of the entire film. And if you're going to have to reshoot and replace that, then I'm guessing it will just become a bland biopic. And I'm sure they've got completely spooked about having anything that might get them into any more trouble. So we're just going to get the fluffiest surface level, and maybe that'll do well. I don't know. But the thing is, if it had have set off with that ambition, let's just make a nice, fluffy Michael Jackson, fill it full of his songs, right? Then it could have had a fighting chance of working. But this is like they're in trying to repair it, fix it mode, and they're on the back foot. So I don't have. I'm not optimistic about this one.
It's such a shame because this makes me think of the documentary that was recently directed by Ezra Edelman for Netflix, which is all about Prince, and Prince's estate blocked it basically because they were concerned that it portrayed him in a bad light. And I think, I remember, I think I listened to an interview with Ezra Edelman. I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes, where he talked about the fact that, Prince is a human being and a flawed human being, as we all are. And I wanted to show that because there is such mystique around him. There's such, distance for all of us. We don't really know who he is. And I feel like I was doing him a service. It was for his reputation to humanize and share the kind of the truth about this person. But they're so fearful of this bad reputation, but basically because they're worried that it might hurt. Well, one interpretation we can get, there'll be many reasons why, I'm sure, but a big thing is is this going to hurt the financial, will he get cancelled, and will that do damage to the kickbacks we get from this? Yeah. And it just kind of makes me think about that. It's I think unless you're really going to do an honest depiction of someone's life, it's almost what is even the point? I think this film seems to me slightly pointless, honestly. Are we going to be learning anything more? If you're a fan, you'll already know all this stuff. You'll know about the successes and the things that they wanted you to know about. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it.
And Miles Teller, a good actor, but he did that Fantastic Four film from a decade ago, and now this. It's come on, Miles, come on, more selective projects.
Yeah, and Jafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, is going to play him, which I think, again, to me, that kind of speaks to the fact that this is very much the Jackson Estates movie.
Yeah.
This is an independent film depicting one of music's greats. This is, like you said, a fluff piece, but we'll see what happens with it.
Yes.
So the other one the one that really piqued our interest, right, was the Daniels forthcoming project.
Oh yeah, just kind of being rescheduled. So, but there seems to be precious little of the juice. What's going on there? We don't. Have you uncovered any whys? I've just got the fact that it is delayed, and the pressure they must be under because they've got to deliver on some follow up to their kind of one of the few pop culture artifacts that the film industry has managed to successfully land of the last decade, I would say.
You're talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, just to spell it out for anyone who forgets who the Daniels are. Yeah. So the Daniels directed Everything Everywhere All at Once, which obviously was a huge box office and critical success. It won the Best Picture at the Oscars when did it come out? 2022? 21?
2022, I would say, rather than 21.
Well, the film is shrouded in secrecy. It was meant to be coming out next year in June, and now it's going to be coming out in November 2027, which is like a prime time for being kind of an awards season's candidate. So in that sense, that looks quite good, but it's always a bad sign, right, when a film is being pushed back.
It's never a great sign, although what we're not hearing is that they've had a trouble shoot. It sounds like they haven't even shot it yet. So, I'm hopeful that, but also if they are feeling the pressure of like, oh my God, second guessing ourselves, trying to come up with a follow-up, the last thing you want is them, we're just moving the date better for award season. So, whenever you finish your script, whatever it's going to be about, no pressure, but, we're just putting you in the prime spot to win all the awards.
That's such a good point. Okay, yeah, well, hopefully they'll start working on it soon. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what the follow-up is. They're interesting filmmakers, but they're in that. It's not quite a difficult second album because it was their second or third films, but the spotlight is on them more than it's ever been. So yeah, I'm rooting for them though. I'm rooting for them to come through.
Now the other one that was scheduled to be out as we speak, and which is pertinent to this week's episode, is Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride, a remake of the 1935 The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, this came up on my radar just because good old World of Reel were publishing a few things over the preceding few months about test screenings not being great and the fact that it had a huge budget and, Maggie Gyllenhaal as a director only got a debut feature and it was a very kind of a low budget thing. So there was lots of talk
a fantastic film, I have to tell you guys, The Lost Daughter. Go watch it. I think it's on Netflix. Brilliant.
So there's just a lot of rumor about, is this a trouble production? What's happening behind the scenes? So there's been rumors bubbling away for months, I would say. And then finally, a trailer came out.
Yes. Well, it's really had a bad run of it because this film was originally a Netflix production and there was like lots of kind of buzz around it. They offered Maggie Gyllenhaal 100 mil for it. And then Netflix abandoned it in favor of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which we will be going on to talk about. And I mean, thankfully, Warner Brothers took over the production, slightly shrunk the budget a little bit to 80 million. I mean, still pretty big for a follow-up movie to, a very small budget one that she did previously. But that was, I think, kind of a bad start to things. And then, as you said, apparently there was some real struggles with it in post-production and bad test screening scores. And apparently Warner Brothers' Pamela Abdi, who's kind of meant to be apparently like the indie filmmaker whisperer, like she's good at sussing out talent. But she was tasked with getting the film into shape, reportedly. And apparently is having a hard time with that. So I feel like maybe perhaps it was just like a bit ambitious for like a next film. I don't want to be like condescending in saying that, but maybe because it's very, different, a much more ambitious story to the film that she's made previously.
Like, I've never directed any kind of feature film, but like a bigger budget film, especially one that is, it's a Frankenstein, so it's going to have prosthetics, effects work. It's going to have a bunch of different things that as a director you wouldn't have dealt with in the previous film. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but it's just like suddenly this is you are being tested out on all these things. How can you orchestrate all of it? And then on top of all that stuff, still tell a good story with compelling characters. And, my impression from Maggie Gyllenhaal is she's an actor's director. And of course, maybe the struggles, I don't know, have been the other things that are beyond that.
Yeah, so originally it was actually scheduled for release on the 3rd of October this year, and then it was brought back to 26th of September, which I suspect might have been because once it was confirmed that Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was coming out on the 17th, I don't know, but I suspect that perhaps a mixture of these troubles with post-production, but also like the rumors, the buzz around Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein being so good. They were like, okay, we don't want to compete with that, because if it had come out now, we'd have two Frankenstein films going up against each other at the Oscars, during awards season.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's tough when he is such a kind of well-established director who is very, well experienced in doing these kinds of films. So yeah, so now it's been pushed back till March 6th, which is actually a March 6th next year, which is a kind of a tricky time to be coming out, because that means, okay, you're literally coming out a few weeks before the Oscars, so you're not part of the awards running at all, and you're also so early in the year, you're probably going to be forgotten by the time we get round to the next
it does
awards.
seem like a bit like they're dumping it a little.
Warner Brothers claimed that the film has been moved because it's event viewing and it will benefit from coming out during the school holidays. Do we believe that, or do we think that it's actually not very, it's not amazing, so we want to keep it out of the awards time frame anyway, so it's not embarrassed?
And they are pushing it as filmed for IMAX, so they're actually going out of their way to at least emphasise the fact that it's meant to be, it's been made to be appreciated on an IMAX screen, which, cool, but it could also be just like, shit, we need people to pay more per ticket to just try and get a little bit of profitability here. I mean, the trailer certainly looks interesting. It also could go either way in reality. Like, it's not going, oh, this will be great or bad, but certainly it's intriguing. I'm interested, but are enough people interested to make back that $80 million budget? It feels like perhaps if they could have made it for half the budget, then maybe it would have been a more sensible move. This feels like Warner Brothers are currently going through a bit of a, we are investing in artists, be damned with the box office, because we have Paul Thomas Anderson, Maggie Gyllenhaal, those are both punts where it's not even close to guaranteed you're going to make lots of money back, but it is something where you can make a clear statement that you are supporting interesting or up-and-coming filmmakers.
Yes. But I love it because it's up and coming filmmakers, but it's Maggie Gyllenhaal, very well known named, and it's very established, well known IP. But I think you're right. I think that in their mind, that's the calculation. It's kind of dipping into both things. We'll see whether that actually works. I mean, I'm really intrigued. I think it does look interesting. We'll probably talk about it more now that as we go into discussing Frankenstein in general. But yes, I was very excited when you told me about The Bride on our episode a few weeks ago, and I then saw the trailer. I thought this looks interesting. So I really I hope they can kind of get it all together and get it out, because I'm interested.
Pamela Abdi, come on, don't cut it to shreds,
Okay, so we've got talking about Frankenstein, so let's get into it. So Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein right now is in theaters.
What manner of devil made him? I did. I created death.
It's a Netflix production, so that means it will literally be in cinemas for 2 weeks before going onto the platform on the 7th of November. So guys, if you can, go see it in the cinema, because I was lucky enough to see it last week, and it is definitely a film worth seeing in the cinema. It really is. It deserves to be on the big screen. It is a feast for the eyes.
Right.
In the very, it's quintessential Del Toro, in the kind of costuming, the colour, the gruesomeness at various moments.
Kind of the gothic production design, I'm guessing, very elaborate and detailed.
Very exactly. It really is like it's very enjoyable to watch from that side of things. They really went to town on this one. I think because Del Toro's talked about the fact that this is a film he's wanted to make for like 40 years, ever since he was a little boy and he watched Frankenstein on the TV at home. He then went and read the book and was like, oh, actually, I mean, I don't think he specified which one, but I can guess that perhaps it was the kind of classic 1931 James Whale.
Yeah.
Frankenstein seems likely, right?
I mean, just from looking at back over Guillermo del Toro's work, just his general aesthetic has this kind of gothic horror feel. Including in the films of his I've watched the most, which are actually the two Hellboy films he directed. He kind of like dip into doing superhero along with the second Blade film. Even they have, even Hellboy is a Frankenstein-esque kind of quality to the character. But it does feel like gothic horror is certainly an interest, and it kind of is in all of his films as a theme, but also as a visual.
Yeah, I have to say that I was came away from it feeling like, yes, that ticks all the boxes, sufficiently camp, sufficiently gothic and glamorous looking, and squelchy, but almost a bit like, I had this feeling that I would love to see Del Toro do something a bit different though, because it feels very in keeping with everything else he's done.
Is it going to be a bit like Wes Anderson? Is that, he just kind of, the later Wes Anderson, it's like you've seen one, you've kind of seen the next one.
Yeah, getting there. I didn't have that same kind of visceral, ugh, how frustrating. But I was a bit like, yeah, it was brilliant and what I expected, but can I see something else from him? But actually then I went to see the Frankenstein exhibition. So Netflix are pulling out all the stops right now. If you want, guys, you can go see an exhibition about the making of this movie. It's at the old Selfridges hotel, I want to say. So if you're in central London, pop down. So I went to this, and actually it was interesting because they had some clips of him talking about the production and various parts of it. And one of the things he said, was that he'd wanted to make this film for a really long time. So I kind of thought, actually, I think maybe rather than this being the same as all his other films have been building up to this film, and this is his kind of...
Yeah.
What do they call it? Modus operus or whatever. There's some Latin.
Yeah, there is a fancy word, isn't there? His piece de resistance. I don't know. No,
but that as well. Yes, his piece de resistance.
I don't know. That's not Latin.
You can tell how well read we are.
Jesus Christ!
But you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying.
You get the gist. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, and that kind of made me again slightly reappraise my attitude towards it, because I'm like, you know what, fair enough, man, you've wanted to do this, and he does it really well. So I've actually been reading Frankenstein right at the moment, the Mary Shelley's original book, and it's interesting because he does change some kind of key plot elements of the plot, nothing major, but just things about the family relationships and the exact series of events, how everything kind of works out and unfolds. But he really, I think, more than say Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, actually captures the kind of spirit and the themes of the book very, very well. So
I guess, my question would be on that kind of faithfulness to the adaptation is the monster articulate like in Mary Shelley's book? Because the thing that surprised me when I first read Frankenstein was the monster kind of, we hear, is in a monologue, he has thoughts, he seems quite compassionate. In fact, I think part of the thing is that he's the most human character in the book. But when you see the films, it's just like a bolt through the neck, big forehead, doesn't say shit really, just kind of grunts, and is essentially a wordless kind of thuggish monster. So, how's that come across in the film adaptation?
James, you're a smart man. Yes, you've nailed it. I would have thought you'd seen the movie. So, crucially, in the book, it's described what we call the monster is described as a creature. But pretty much, I think, since James Whale's kind of quintessential classic 1931 movie of Frankenstein, which kind of solidified the concept of the Frankenstein monster as, like you said, this thuggish, huge kind of oafish man with the screws in his neck. We have thought of it as this monster who, doesn't really have a thought, doesn't really feel, is not human, is unhuman, right? And you've nailed it. In this adaptation, unlike many of the other ones, which it's interesting because Kenneth Branagh's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as the title of his movie is, that's considered the closest out of all the adaptations, and there have been apparently around 60 over the years. So Hollywood is obsessed with the story. That is the closest to the book. But the thing is that film really makes Victor Frankenstein out to be the hero, really. And the creature is still pretty monstrous. But in this adaptation, it's really, I think, movingly done in that it shows that the creature does have feelings, is a human, feels things, is lonely. And the dominant theme of the film, even though there are, I think, quite a few in these Frankenstein stories, is one of a father and a son. So Victor Frankenstein wants to be God, wants to create a person, a human, wants to essentially become a father. But then when their creation is born, their child is born, they're not prepared to be a father. They're ill-equipped to deal with it, and then the consequences that come from that. And then, I listened to an interview with Del Toro. I'll put a link in the show notes, where he talked about how this film kind of changed. His idea for the film changed after he became a parent, and he kind of compares the creature to a teenager, and how we think of teenagers, they're going through a difficult time right now, but they'll grow out of it. No, he says they're speaking truth. You just don't want to hear it. And you see that in the film, that's analogous in the film. And it's really, really beautifully done, because, there's also this clear idea that, who is the actual monster here? And you definitely get the sense that it is Frankenstein and not his creature who is the actual monster. And
Justice
very well
for
done.
The monster, for the creature,
Justice
finally.
for the monster. And also, shout out to Jacob Elordi. He was fantastic. He's actually a brilliant actor, and I think he can be... I've been dismissive of him for being a pretty boy, but actually, he is not that pretty boy in this part, as you
I was
going
to say,
right?
What did they do to his beautiful face in this? I mean, is he under makeup, or...?
Yeah, there's some heavy makeup, heavy prosthetics, and but his eyes are there, and those eyes emit a lot. It's really moving. So I was very impressed.
Great, okay. So recommended at the cinema, would you say, Lily? Yeah, so it sounds like it.
Yeah, strongly. I really do think this is the thing, it's difficult because, okay, Netflix are willing to stump up the cash for these bigger budget movies. But then if they're only willing to, it doesn't make business sense for them to give them a long running in the theatre. They want people to be watching it on,
and then of course, if it's
streamer.
Successful for those 2 weeks, it just means
shame.
theatres don't get any, they get 2 weeks of audiences coming in, and then they're snatched away from them, basically, which is a real shame. It's a shame that Netflix can't, I don't think extending the run at the box office would affect the viewing figures on Netflix too much. And anyway, they don't really make money off viewing figures. That's the other thing I don't get. Like Apple released Formula One and gave it a proper theatrical run, and it's made a decent amount of money at the box office for them. So Apple get it. Apple get that, hey, if we put it in the cinemas and it's a good film, it makes money. We like money. Money is good.
Yeah, but I don't think for Netflix, I don't think money because of the cost, I think, of putting it out in the box office. I mean, look, F1 it was clearly meant to be a big box office film, and lots of people go see it. But I think for the most part, it's not really worth it to them, because especially if the fact that it's going out at this point for 2 weeks, it's just about making it eligible for awards. And other than that, for them, the business aspect of it is not about getting people to go see it at the cinema. I think for them, it's about having the stats on people. They have a different business model.
I know. It's a shame. I mean, they've basically made a film that deserves to be seen on the big screen, as you're saying, and yet they're kind of like dangling it there for a few weeks to pick up the awards, then pulling it back. So it's a shame. It's a shame. It
is. But I really wanted to talk about Frankenstein because, as I mentioned, this is a story that has been adapted a staggering number of times. I mean, yes, from what I've read, there are at least 60 Frankenstein-specific movies, but also at least 419 feature films that feature Frankenstein. I was looking through the list and some things really got my attention. There apparently was a film called Frankenhooker in 1990, and also another called I Was a Teenage Frankenstein in 1957. And of course, in the 70s, there was Blackenstein, a blaxploitation version of Frankenstein.
Great. So, Hollywood seems to love the Frankenstein story, doesn't it? The earliest example I could find was from 1910, a single reel adaptation made at Thomas Edison Studios. So very, very early era cinema, written and directed by J. Searle Dawley. Don't quite know who he is, but from the very get-go, it's clearly a story that was compelling to put on screen. Maybe it's because there's a monster, so you could get to have some fun with the makeup and the costume. Maybe that's part of its appeal.
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because you can actually plot film history through the Frankenstein movies. The fact that, there was a blaxploitation one, there was, this early one in 1915 that's now lost.
It's like with Sherlock Holmes and Dracula. They keep popping up throughout the history of cinema in various guises. What was interesting, just kind of thinking about it for this podcast record, is, of course, the definitive, let's say, screen Frankenstein, certainly the one that when we imagine what a Frankenstein monster looks like, it's the 1931 James Whale directed, with the kind of mad scientist and the lightning strikes, the It's Alive, all that kind of stuff. And I suddenly thought, oh God, right, that's 1931. So that's just after German expressionist cinema, so kind of like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I think is the 1920s, but basically this kind of whole era of German expressionism, which I love, which is all about unreal sets, things where they have strange angles, very deliberate shadowed lighting, which is in fact sometimes carried on in the how they paint the floors of the sets. They'll paint shadows onto the floor, so everything was really heightened, and you can see visually looking at the Frankenstein from 1931, it's the Hollywoodization, the kind of like the cleaning up, just making it look a bit more presentable to an American audience, is the Hollywoodization of the German expressionist movement. So it's kind of their riff on that, I think.
And then now you fast forward to now, and I think we've got to acknowledge the fact that one of the biggest films of last year was Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things, which is clearly a riff on Frankenstein. We have Willem Dafoe playing that kind of Frankenstein mad scientist and Emma Stone as his monster. And now we're here with Del Toro's Frankenstein. And as we've mentioned, we have a Maggie Gyllenhaal remake of Bride of Frankenstein, which is another Frankenstein adaptation that should be coming out soon. Why do you think at this particular moment in time, I mean, clearly, look, it's a eternally popular story, but why do you think we've got this kind of dense revisiting of it right now?
I mean, I think it could be two angles, couldn't it? I mean, it's this story of creating life. So I think that anytime there's any kind of technological change, perhaps Frankenstein becomes a good narrative to employ for them. So right now, the obvious thing is artificial intelligence. This idea that we are birthing for the first time in human history, giving birth to an intelligence that is not human, is not created the way that we are created. So there's that. I also think, I'm just going to take a punt with Maggie Gyllenhaal. I think there's, because obviously the original book was written by a woman, by Mary Shelley, and you could say to some degree it's about the creation of life without women is kind of one of the anxieties that goes through her book. And so perhaps there's some redress of the fact that essentially that was all lost in the Frankenstein's a wordless monster. All of that nuance from the book, it's not in the 1931 James Whale version, and it's not what we think of when we think of Frankenstein. We don't think, oh, it was a female author, perhaps she was reflecting anxieties that women had at the time and even today. So perhaps there's also a bit of a feminist redress coming from Maggie Gyllenhaal. So I think two elements there could be what are making the Frankenstein myth appealing to storytellers today.
Yes, yeah, I think that's true. I think that there is the brilliance of Mary Shelley's novel is that there are so many different themes being explored in this book. And the interesting thing about these three adaptations that are coming out around now is that there is some crossover, but they all look at different things, right? So Yorgos Lanthimos' version, I would say, is a very feminist movie. Like it is really looking at autonomy and a woman's emancipation and her like self-exploration. Sexual freedom is a huge thing in that film. So I think there's that. And then, as I said, with Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, it's very much looking at fathers and sons and he used the phrase chains of pain and breaking those and family trauma. And then with The Bride, okay, we've not seen this movie yet. We can only kind of deduce from the trailer, but it seems to be kind of about, like, yes, a very feminist telling with women causing kind of social change and
the fact it's called The Bride, so it's about the Bride of Frankenstein. It's obviously the focus is going to be on Jessie Buckley's The Bride of Frankenstein rather than, I guess, Christian Bale's Frankenstein.
Yes,
No, Frankenstein.
yes,
Sorry,
yes.
Christian Bale's monster.
Yeah.
God damn it, I'm doing the obvious thing,
Creature.
Creature, yes, thank you.
Creature or monster, whatever. Yeah, I know. This is the classic thing. You know what? As a sidebar, I went to see Frankenstein, a theatre production of Frankenstein a few years ago. It was directed by Danny Boyle and starred Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller as Frankenstein's monster, as it was listed in the in the credits. And the thing was, they swapped each night, so you could pick who you wanted to see playing which. And now, obviously, I wanted to see Benedict Cumberbatch playing the monster, but when I went to select which way round it would be, it wasn't listed as who do you want to play Frankenstein and who do you want to play the monster. It was only who do you want to play Frankenstein. So I selected Johnny Lee Miller. And then when I came to see the actual show, of course, Johnny Lee Miller was playing the creature because there's such a
monster.
Yes, because the Frankenstein, when we say Frankenstein, we think of the monster. We don't actually think of Victor Frankenstein, the father.
So the person pulling together that bit of the ticketing website was like, oh yeah, you want to see Frankenstein? Yeah, thinking that.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I anticipated that. I remember sitting there with my mum and sister, being like, "Do you think that this is a mistake, or do you think that they've got it right? They must have got it right. Okay, Johnny Lee Miller as Frankenstein." Okay, no, he's playing. So, yeah, but it was brilliant. Look, it was fantastic, and Johnny Lee Miller did a great job playing.
I'll be honest with you. In my mind, Benedict Cumberbatch is an excellent Frankenstein, not Frankenstein's monster. In my mind, that was
why I wanted to see it the other way, because to me it makes sense for him
interested.
to be the mad scientist. That seems like classic casting, and Johnny Lee Miller seems perfect, right, as the creature.
But you wanted
so
to
that's
see
why I
the
wanted
flip
to
side of
see something different. But you know what? It was brilliant. It was brilliant. But yeah, so I think it's interesting because there are so many different themes that are being pulled out with these different films, and what's smart about that, right, is that I think they will appeal to different audiences. Like initially when I heard, it's tricky that Maggie Gyllenhaal is bringing out her own version of Frankenstein around the same time. Actually, I'm sure different people would have gone to see these movies. So I'm not sure it would have been as, like, you know, a clash as it might appear.
I always love a good head-to-head. You know, I was there for the head-to-head of Armageddon versus Deep Impact. Which of the meteor hitting the planet Earth and destroying things films going to win at the box office? I went to see both. You know, I was full tilt into all that kind of stuff back in the day.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? They should have done a Barbenheimer and had them come out the same weekend. That would have been brilliant. I would have seen both.
At least with Barbenheimer, you've got the contrast. Here it's like more Frankenstein.
No, but it's not, because obviously in the Frankenstein story, guys, I don't want to spoil it in case you haven't read it or you haven't seen the movie, but yeah, the small thing, like he wants a bride, but that doesn't happen. So this is definitely the sequel. This is the sequel. Right. So you could go see Frankenstein, then go see The Bride. Perfection.
Right. Okay. What a double bill. Maybe in years to come that will get paired up together. Who knows? Maybe we'll be at a Prince Charles all-night Frankenstein-a-thon.
Yeah, or the Nickel. I could see the Nickel doing it. The theatre we mentioned last week.
Don't go and see Salo, right? So when you finally do go see it, I want a compilation of how many times I told you not to see it. Anyway, sorry. So this is just for the record yet again. Don't.
Guys, if anyone hasn't listened to our last episode, this is a throwback to that when I was considering going to see Salo at the Nickel, which James strongly advised me against. And of course, that made me want to go see it even more.
I know.
So my husband and I do have tickets, as James feared. He's been replaying that reel, by the way, of you saying don't. It's hilarious. So we're going to go see it. We will discuss it on the podcast. Of course, heavily censored. But, you know, I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. I know I'm going to be traumatized. I'm not going to see most of the film. My hands are going to be over my face. But what can I do?
Like, I mean, I guess the big thing is, will you stick to the end or not? Because, you know, and if you stick to the end, you will be rewarded by the most, like, tragic bit of the whole film. But, you know, the point is, like, I'd say 2/3 of the audience that when I saw it 20 years ago, they walked out. Or maybe time, you know, maybe I've just, you know, maybe I need to just loosen up a bit. Maybe it's worth a reappraisal. I don't know, but I'm not willing to give it a punt. Sorry.
Was it you who told me that a friend of yours used to screen it for their new students?
for their new students. And the thing is, we've got a comment on our Instagram reel saying, "I was screened it at our MA, and I, you know, and you don't." They said, "Don't go to see it on Instagram." By the way, well, the audience is speaking, Lily, but they said their tutor screened it. I was like, "Oh my god, is that someone from Goldsmiths? I wonder, is that the same?"
So a Goldsmiths tutor at the start of every year would screen Salo to the new MA students. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know if it was MA students or undergrads. You know, I don't want to get in it. So all I'm saying is it was an annual thing done to his cohort.
Done to his cohort. Yes, very well chosen words.
Sorry, yeah, but apparently nobody complained. Apparently, so fine. You know, I'm just an out of touch old man.
That. Okay, yeah, well, we'll revisit that at a later date. But moving on now from horror, let's talk about Heat 2.
Hey, hooray! Okay, yes, I mean, like I said, I don't know. I've never been wanting a sequel. It's, you know, it says long. You know, I will go and see it because it's Michael Mann, but I didn't finish Heat going, God, I need to know what next. That's like a nice film that tells its story. We have a good time, you know. So part of me is like, just leave it. But as far as sequels go that nobody asked for, this does look quite promising.
Okay, well, let's just rewind for anyone who doesn't know what Heat is.
You want to be making moves on the street? Allow nothing to be in your life that you cannot walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner.
My life's a disaster zone because I spend all my time chasing guys like you around the block.
I do what I do best. I take scores. You do what you do best, trying to stop guys like me.
Directed by Michael Mann in 1995, starring Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, which is quite famous for because there's this iconic scene where the two of them meet and talk in a diner.
Up till then, they'd never shared the screen together, so it was a big deal. It was like part of the marketing, to be honest. It was the one thing that always came up was that they're on screen together.
Yeah, my God, like it's kind of extraordinary.
It is like that. It shows you how times have changed. But that I remember being a big kind of deal. Like, oh my God, Pacino and De Niro on screen, and now I think they've done a couple of like directed Amazon Prime films together and stuff. But back in the 90s, it was a pop cultural moment.
Yeah, it's just funny, isn't it? Because today, stars don't have the same power. So the idea of being like, oh my God, how amazing, these two big stars in the same sharing the screen, it happens all the time and it's not really news. But anyway, so Al Pacino played a police detective who was tracking down Robert De Niro, a professional thief who was looking to pull off one last heist. So classic, quintessential, really strong recommendation. It's this was like, the film that James suggests we talk about to kind of kick off groovy movies, and it was ideal because I'd never seen it, and it really is such a fun watch and brilliant in so many ways.
Yeah, it's a film that I've grown to enjoy more and more over the years. My first, I think we discussed in the podcast, I wasn't too impressed the first time, but then I was a younger, slightly more pretentious film appreciator. I was going through my cinesthete, whatever you call it, you know. But anyway, so it wasn't pretentious enough, whereas now I'm like, no, this is a great film. Very like a modern Hollywood masterpiece as far as these things go.
Yeah, I like that probably back then you were like, oh, this is a bit too mainstream, a bit too big budget.
Absolutely.
And now if you watch this movie, it's like an art house film compared to what is made today.
Yeah. What was mainstream then, it's, art house nowadays. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, God, the 90s was really the heyday of these sort of action films. But okay, so Heat 2. There's an interesting story, right, to the sequel coming to fruition. If hopefully it will still in the process, but hopefully will come to fruition.
Yeah. So it first popped on my radar again. I think World of Real, thank you. But the fact that it was going to be published as a novel was Heat 2. And so as soon as I saw that it was Michael Mann writing a novel, I think co-written by author Meg Gardiner. But as soon as I saw that it was writing a novel, it screamed to me, this is his pitch for making the film. You know, Michael Mann, isn't a renowned author. At least I don't know he is. I haven't looked at it, but I'm going to say he's more well known for his filmmaking than his books. So
I'm pretty confident this was his first book.
Right. So the point is, it's a pitch, and because Hollywood's changed now, I think people are a bit nervous. So let's write a book so everyone totally understands what they are paying money for when they finance the film. And also, I think it helped generate, do people care about this? And there's obviously enough people talking about it. I'm sure it gathered a lot of internet traffic to say, okay, yeah, there's also interest in another Heat story. So I think it was a very smart move, and so far it appears to be paying off.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the reviews I read of the book itself were not particularly great, but
Really?
yes, but as like you said, as a pitch for a movie, it has clearly worked. And apparently the plot is kind of Godfather 2 style, so it's a prequel and a sequel, and it centers around Val Kilmer's character in the film. He wasn't like one of the lead characters, but he was sort of a featured side character, I guess. You know, he was the subplot, I guess.
I was reading the other day. I don't know if you already know this. Sorry, Lily, if it's like a common fact, but Val Kilmer did it for scale, or he did it for a vastly reduced fee. He didn't take his normal fee to play the part, and he just said to Michael Mann, "If you want to make it up for me." Or he said in his contract, just I want to be in between De Niro and Pacino on the poster. And so when you look at the poster, he's got a very iconic position in the three. And it's like, if that's true, I love that. You know, yeah, sure, I'll do it for cheap. I want to be right in the middle of the two giants on the poster, which he is, and he looks great there.
And perhaps that's partly how it came to be that he's like the focus of the sequel, because he was already well placed in that poster, so he's there in our mind's eye. So it follows Val Kilmer's character Chris Shiherlis, and obviously, sadly, Val Kilmer died a couple of years ago, so he's not going to be in the movie. But the rumor is that Leonardo DiCaprio is in talks to play the lead part. And now there's been this like further reporting that Michael Mann is considering using de-aging technology. So we might have some flashback that will help with the flashbacks to Val Kilmer as a younger man. And then I guess Leonardo DiCaprio is picking him up as an older man.
I guess so. I guess the age works out about right. Is if the sequel element is like not too far after, maybe it's a decade or so after the events of Heat. Yeah, I'm not a fan of de-aging tech at all. I would much prefer just recast, just cast. My brain can accept that I'm seeing the same character and it's a different actor, and I think I lose myself into the story much more than when it's de-aging. I'm just always, no matter how good it is, I'm always aware of the effect of de-aging, and somehow in my mind that just like The Irishman. Very good de-aging, but you could still see there was something funny going on. You watch Oppenheimer, and you've got Cillian Murphy playing himself, the character at university who should be in his 20s, and it's Cillian Murphy. They do everything they can with they give him an oversized costume to make him seem smaller. They give him makeup. I'd much prefer that than if they try to digitally de-age him. So yeah, I don't think he said he's definitely going to use it. I just think he's saying it's not off the table. He'll use it where appropriate. So, because the thing is, Lily, is that digital de-aging certainly does seem to be much more convincing when it's done with AI. They've done side by side. So they've redone the shots from The Irishman using AI, and the AI'd versions look better than the version they did a few years ago.
Oh, interesting.
All this deep fake. This deepfake technology yields better results than just using all the traditional methods that were originally used on The Irishman.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because I'm so clueless about this stuff. When I saw that World of Real, again, basically sponsoring this episode, though please give us some cash, reported that Heat 2 will use AI and de-aging technology, and I was like, and when I read it, he doesn't actually say that, but he does talk about how we'll consider using a de-aging technology where he's going to look into it and seriously consider it. And I was like, so where does AI come into that? But okay, that makes sense. So it used to be the case that it wasn't with AI. The Irishman didn't use that, but now here we are just a couple of years later, and this is a possibility and does a better job of it.
That's exactly it. It's one of those cases where you absolutely can make the argument that shooting things for real still looks better than AI generated reality. That there's so many things that definitely shooting for real does better, but for the specific thing of de-aging an actor to look like a younger version of himself, it's these deep fakes that actually do yield better results. So as a filmmaker, if you're looking at all the options available, that's probably your best card. If you do want to do de-aging, I would be like, oh, please just recast. You watched the original Christopher Reeve Superman recently, and for all its strengths and weaknesses, I quite like that there's a different actor playing the teenage Clark Kent. I don't sit there going, oh, that's not Christopher Reeve. I just kind of watch the story and get into it. I'd much rather that kind of thing.
And it's interesting because with this article this World of Real article, the tone was very critical of that. Like, oh, this isn't going to be great for him. He's going to alienate the fans. Because in the filmmaking world, AI is such a dirty word. It's obviously, understandably, that people are very fearful of it and what's going to happen with it. But I think the reality is, for the cinema-going audience, I don't think they care. I think it's clear that people like to use ChatGPT or whatever. People, know in theory that it's a threat, but really people are moving with the times. So I think, if it helps his movie, then, well, yeah, why not really? But you're right. I mean, it'd be great if he could just recast it and use some actual actors. The interesting thing, though, is that, Michael Mann is now 79 years old. He started working on Heat back in 1979. Like, it was already, when he finally made the film, he'd been working on that script. He'd done a TV version of it. There'd been other iterations. So it is interesting that this is kind of his, like, lifelong professional preoccupation. So I'm just really hoping for his sake that they do actually get to making the movie, because the only thing that's making me a little bit nervous is that, okay, great to hear that people are in talks, that they're, the big report was that it had moved from Warner Brothers to Amazon MGM's United Artists with this other producer, Scott Stuber. So like things were happening to make the film get a bit of energy behind it. But I'm like, the more you talk about it, babe, like he's talked about how it's going to have a proper theatrical release, probably in about 4,000 cinemas, at least 45 days. Okay, that's a big run. You haven't even started filming yet. You haven't even announced a cast. So like, let's just see. Okay, maybe stop talking about it. Let's just see what happens with it. But I do hope it comes true.
Yeah. And, just a quick little aside, United Artists there, that name pops up. I mean, it's obviously been bought and sold and it's just a name now. But, of course, the company was set up in 1919 by Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, amongst others. So it's like that name, at least, is a very, it's got a very, very long lineage in Hollywood. But not that it means much these days. It's essentially Amazon money.
Yeah, I was going to say, but Amazon owned now. But yeah, you're right. It has got a great, it's got, the name is significant. Okay, to wrap up, James, do you have a cinema recommendation for us?
I absolutely do. This particular recommendation came up on my radar through, I think, my Instagram feed, and it popped up because obviously the algorithm knows that I'm into film and film presentation. And this week's recommendation is Warwick University's Student Cinema. I checked with them. I slid into their DMs. And I just checked that members of the public can turn up and buy tickets. Either just turn up on the day of the performance, or you can book online, and you can also book like a ticket, a non-student ticket. So it's open to everybody, and they screen films digitally, but also in 35mm and 70mm film, which, as you know, I love. So there is a place in Warwick now that you can go, and the prices are very, very reasonable, cheaper than your multiplex. So this coming Sunday Sunday weekend coming, they're showing 2001: A Space Odyssey from 70mm. They've also got Spartacus, West Side Story, and Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, all in 35mm.
I love that. That is a childhood, a kind of preteen favourite of mine. I'm very glad to see it's going to get a print screening. That's incredible.
I know, right? They screen films almost every night of the week as well. So there's a packed program. There'll definitely be something that you'd be interested to see. The tickets are reasonable, and you'll be able to get, if you're interested in seeing what film looks like, check out one of their film screenings.
So we'll add a link to that in the show notes, and do let us know if you have any other recommendations for independent, or in this case, student cinemas you want us to shout out.
Yeah, anything that you think deserves a little bit of recognition because it goes above and beyond the usual.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Thank you very much as always. And if you could leave us a like, write us a nice 5-star review, all these things really help our podcast get out there into the world.
So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Groovy Movies is produced and edited by us, Lily Austin and James Brailsford. And James also produced the theme music.
Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Groovy Movies Pod, or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
For more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.